When the stage finally rolled into Willow Creek, Wyoming, and the mail-order bride climbed down, she was wearing rags and carrying nothing, and the first words out of her mouth were an apology. It was a cold, bright morning in the autumn of 1885, and Isaac Wren had come to town with his little daughter to meet the woman he had sent for, and what stepped down out of that coach was not at all what a man expects when he has spent 4 months exchanging letters and hopes. Her good traveling dress was torn and filthy, her bonnet was gone, she had a fading bruise along one cheekbone, and she carried no trunk, no bag, nothing at all but the ruined clothes on her back. She looked, in plain truth, like a woman who had been through something terrible, which she had. Naomi Hart stood in the dust of the Willow Creek street and looked at the tall grave rancher and the small girl clutching his hand, and instead of asking for help, instead of explaining herself, instead of any of the things a person in her state might reasonably do, she straightened her ruined dress as best she could and told him she was sorry. She said she understood completely if he wanted to send her back, that she was not what he had paid for, that she had nothing left to offer him, and would not blame him in the least for turning her away right there in the street. She asked him for nothing. That was the thing Isaac Wren never forgot about that first morning, and told the story of for the rest of his life. A woman with nothing in the world, no money, no clothes, no way home, and the first thing she did was give him a way to be rid of her without guilt. But before Isaac could find any words at all, before the grown-ups could sort out the wreck of the situation, something happened that decided the whole thing. His little daughter, 7 years old and motherless for 2 long years, let go of her father's hand. She walked right up to the ragged stranger, and she looked up at that bruised, tired face for a long, quiet moment, with the frank, searching eyes small children have. And then Lily Wren reached up and slipped her small hand into Naomi Hart's, and she did not let go. To understand why that undid 2 grown people right there in the street, you have to know what the Wrens had lost, and what Naomi had lost, and how a robbery on a lonely road had brought a woman with nothing to the one doorstep in all of Wyoming where nothing was exactly enough. Isaac Wren was 34, and he had been running his cattle ranch outside Willow Creek alone with his daughter for 2 years, ever since the fever winter took his wife. Her name had been Ellen, and she had been the light of that house, and when she died, she left behind a grieving husband who did not know the first thing about raising a little girl, and a 5-year-old who could not understand why her mother did not come back. The 2 years since had been a long, quiet struggle. Isaac loved his daughter with his whole broken heart, but a cattle ranch does not run itself, and a man cannot be out on the range at dawn and also braiding a small girl's hair. And Lily had been growing up half wild and wholly lonely, raised in the gaps between her father's work by whatever ranch hand happened to be nearest. It was Lily who had changed Isaac's mind about sending for a wife, though she never knew it. He had heard her one night, through the thin wall, talking to her rag doll in the dark, telling the doll a long made-up story about a mama who was coming, a mama who would brush her hair and sing to her and be there when she woke up. Isaac had stood in that dark hallway with his hand over his mouth and understood that his grief, which he had thought was a private thing, was starving his daughter of something he could not give her, no matter how hard he worked. He was not looking to replace Ellen. He knew a person could not be replaced, but he could not go on watching Lily tell her longing to a rag doll, and so he had done the humbling thing and put a notice in a matrimonial paper, honest about everything, a widower with a motherless girl, and a hard life, and not much to offer but steady kindness. The letters he got back mostly wanted things he could not promise, romance or comfort or a fresh young man's whole heart, and Isaac had none of those to give, because most of his heart was still up on the hill with Ellen. Then Naomi Hart's letters came, and they were different, and they were the reason he'd sent her the passage money. She had not written like a woman looking for love. She had written like a woman looking for a purpose, plainly and without pretense, and she had said the thing that caught him and would not let go. She wrote that she did not expect romance and would not ask for it, that she had known a great grief of her own and understood that a heart could be full of the dead and still have room to be useful to the living, and that if he had a child who needed a steady, loving hand, She believed she could be that hand, and would ask for nothing more than a place to be needed. Naomi Hart was 28, and she had already buried her whole world once. 2 years before, back in Missouri, she had been a wife and a mother, married to a good decent farmer named Jacob, with a baby boy who had her eyes. And then the diphtheria had come through their county the way it came through so many, and in the space of 1 black month it took the baby first and then Jacob, and Naomi had come out the other side of that month alive, which felt at the time like the cruelest thing of all. She had nursed both of them to the end with her own hands, and could not save either, and afterward she found herself 26 years old and utterly alone, with a farm she could not work, and a grief that had no bottom to it. She lost the farm within the year, the way a woman alone loses a farm, slowly and then all at once. She worked as a hired girl after that, and as a laundress, and she survived, but she did not exactly live, because the thing that had made her a person, the being needed by people she loved, had been taken from her, and without it, she was just a pair of working hands, going through the motions of staying alive. She did not want another husband. She did not think she had another marriage in her. What she wanted, what she ached for in a way she could barely put words to, was to matter to someone again, to be necessary, to have a small, warm life that needed her in it. When she saw Isaac Wren's honest little notice, the widower with the motherless girl, something in her that had been dead for 2 years turned over in its sleep. She wrote to him with no illusions and no hopes above her station. She did not promise to love him, because she did not think she had that to give, and she would not lie to a grieving man about a thing so important. She promised instead the thing she did have, which was a whole heart's worth of unused mothering, and a strong pair of hands, and a hard-won understanding of exactly what it was to lose everything and go on. She spent the last of her small savings on the passage west, and she boarded the stage in Missouri with 1 trunk holding everything she owned in the world, which was not much, and she set out toward Wyoming and a stranger's motherless child, thinking that perhaps, at the far end of the country, she might be needed again. She never got there with any of it. 3 days out, on a lonely stretch of road in eastern Wyoming, the stage was stopped by armed men. The men who stopped the stage were road agents, 3 of them, the kind of desperate, violent men that the emptier stretches of the territory still bred in those years. They took the strongbox from the boot, and then they took the passengers' valuables, and Naomi Hart, who had 1 trunk holding the entire remainder of her life, made the mistake of trying to hold on to it. When one of the men wrenched it from her, everything she owned in the world spilled into the road. Her few good clothes, her dead husband's watch, the tiny knitted cap that had been her baby's, the last physical traces of the family she had lost. She went after them into the dirt, and one of the road agents, impatient and cruel, struck her across the face with the back of his hand and knocked her down, and then they took what they wanted and rode off and left the stage robbed and shaken in the middle of the empty road. It was the baby's cap she cried over, kneeling there in the dust while the other passengers picked themselves up. Not the clothes, not the watch, not the money that was now gone and would strand her. The little knitted cap, the last thing her hands had made for a child who did not live to grow into it, was gone into a road agent's saddlebag, and it was the losing of that, on top of everything else she had already lost, that nearly broke Naomi Hart for good. She knelt in the road and thought, quite clearly and quite calmly, that perhaps the world simply meant for her to have nothing and be nothing, and that she should stop fighting it. But the stage had to go on, and she had nowhere to go but forward, and so she climbed back into the coach in her torn dress with her bruised face and rode the last 2 days to Willow Creek with nothing at all, dreading every mile of it. Because now the plan that had given her one small flicker of hope was ruined too. She had meant to arrive respectable, clean and decent, a woman a man could see was worth taking a chance on. Instead, she was going to step down in front of Isaac Wren, looking like exactly what the road had made her, a beaten, ragged pauper with empty hands, and she was certain, bone certain, that he would take one look and send her back. She spent those last 2 days composing the little speech that would let him do it without feeling like a cruel man, because even at the bottom of her own despair, Naomi Hart's first thought was to spare somebody else discomfort. That was simply the kind of person she was, and it was about to be the saving of her. So now you understand what stepped down from that stage in Willow Creek, and why she asked for nothing, and why Isaac Wren stood there speechless. He had braced himself, on the drive into town, for a stranger he would have to learn. He had not braced himself for a woman who had so plainly been through hell and whose first act, standing in it, was to offer him an easy way out. Something about that cut straight through Isaac's careful widower's reserve. Here was a person who understood loss the way he understood it. He could see it in her, and who had come through it still thinking first of other people, and he found that the little speech she was giving him, the one meant to release him, was doing the exact opposite. And then Lily let go of his hand. Isaac watched his shy, half-wild, motherless daughter, who hid behind his leg from every stranger in Willow Creek, walk right up to this ragged, bruised woman and study her face with those solemn eyes. He held his breath. Lily had a way of knowing things about people that Isaac had learned to trust more than his own judgment, and he watched whatever it was his daughter was reading in that tired face. Then Lily reached up and took Naomi's hand in her small one, and Naomi Hart looked down at the child holding on to her, and her composed, careful face simply came apart. "You have sad eyes," Lily told the stranger, matter of fact, the way children say the true things adults have learned to hide. "My papa has sad eyes too. Mama went to heaven and we can't get her back." She considered Naomi's bruised cheek and her ruined dress with grave sympathy, and then she asked, in a small, hopeful voice that went through both grown-ups like a blade, whether the lady's mama had gone to heaven too, and whether that was why her eyes were so sad. Naomi knelt down in the dust of the street so she was level with the child, and she held Lily's small hand in both of hers, and she said no, that it was her own little boy who had gone to heaven, and her husband, and that she had been very lonely for a long time, and that yes, that was why her eyes were sad. Lily Wren took this in with the seriousness of a child who knows exactly what heaven means, because it has already taken her mother. She reached up with her free hand and patted Naomi's bruised cheek, very gently, the way someone had probably once patted hers. And then she turned to look up at her father, and she asked him the question that decided everything, in a whisper that carried in the still street. "Papa, can she stay? She's sad like us. Please, can she be our mama?" Isaac Wren crouched down in the street beside his daughter and the ragged stranger, and he had to work for a moment to get his voice to come, because his own eyes had gone hot and blurred. He looked at Naomi Hart, kneeling in the dust holding his daughter's hand, asking for nothing, and he made a decision that he would never once regret, and he made it out loud, so there could be no taking it back. He told her that he was not going to send her anywhere. He told her that whatever the road had done to her clothes and her belongings did not change one word of the letters she had written, and that the woman in those letters was the one he had sent for, and here she was. "I didn't send for a trunk full of clothes," Isaac told her, steadying his voice, one arm around his daughter and his eyes on Naomi's. "I sent for the woman who wrote me that a heart could be full of the dead and still have room to be useful to the living. You arrived with nothing in your hands, and you're right that you did. But you didn't arrive with nothing to offer. My girl just walked up to you out of the blue and asked you to be her mama, and she has not willingly gone near a stranger in 2 years. Children know things. I've learned to trust her on it." He stood, and he helped Naomi up out of the dust, and he kept hold of her hand a moment longer than he needed to. "So let's not talk about sending anybody back. Let's get you some proper clothes and a hot meal, and then let's go home, all 3 of us." He was careful, though, and I want you to notice the care, because it is the whole reason this became a great marriage and not just a practical arrangement. On the drive out to the ranch, with Lily asleep between them, worn out from excitement, Isaac told Naomi plainly how things stood, so that she would never feel bought or trapped. He told her there was no hurry on anything, that she would have her own room and her own place in the household, that he would not ask a single thing of her that she did not freely offer. He told her that he had loved his Ellen and always would, and he suspected she still loved her Jacob, and that neither of those loves was a thing to be ashamed of or to rush past. Whatever grew between the two of them, he said, would grow in its own time or not at all. And either way, she and Lily had a home. Naomi Hart rode through the dark toward a ranch she had never seen, with a sleeping child's head against her side, and felt, for the first time in 2 years, the thing she had crossed a country to find. She was needed. Somebody small and warm was leaning on her in the dark and had already decided she belonged. It was not love yet, not the grown-up kind, but it was a place to stand. And for a woman who had been standing on nothing for 2 years, a place to stand is very nearly everything. The first months at the Wren Ranch were a slow, careful growing together, and the one who led the way was Lily, because children do not know how to be careful and just love you straight out. Naomi threw herself into the mothering she had ached to do for 2 years, and the starved, motherless house bloomed under it almost at once. She brushed and braided Lily's wild hair every morning and sang her the songs her own mother had sung. She sewed the child proper dresses to replace the ranch hand-mended rags Lily had been wearing. She filled the kitchen with the smell of real cooking, and she sat at the foot of Lily's bed every single night and told her stories until the little girl slept, so that Lily never again had to tell her longing to a rag doll in the dark. Naomi and Isaac, meanwhile, moved toward each other the slow, shy way 2 grief-worn grown people do, and there was no rushing it, and neither of them tried. In the evenings, after Lily was asleep, they took to sitting together on the porch, and they talked, and it turned out they had a great deal to say to each other. 2 people who had each walked all the way through the valley of losing everything and come out the far side still standing. He told her about Ellen, and she told him about Jacob and the baby, and far from coming between them, the sharing of their dead somehow made room. Grief is lonely, and the only true company for it is another person who has been there, and Isaac and Naomi had each found, at the far end of the country, the one person who understood. There is a line from the writer George Eliot, from the book Middlemarch, that says it better than I can. "What do we live for," Eliot wrote, "if it is not to make life less difficult for each other?" That was the whole of what was happening on that porch, night after night. 2 people who had each thought their capacity for happiness was buried with the people they'd lost were discovering, slowly and to their own astonishment, that making one small motherless girl's life less difficult had made their own lives less difficult too, and that the warmth they were building for Lily was warming them right along with her. Naomi had come west asking for nothing, only to be needed. She was finding out that being needed, done right, turns without your noticing into being loved. The thing that turned the growing warmth into something unbreakable was the worst kind of test, and it came in the dead of that first winter, when Lily took sick. It started as a cough and a fever, and Isaac's face went gray the moment he saw it, because a child's fever in a Wyoming winter was exactly how he had lost Ellen, exactly how Naomi had lost her baby, and both of them knew with sick certainty what a fever could do out there, days from any doctor worth the name. For one terrible night, it looked like the past was going to reach out and take this child too, and Isaac Wren, who had already buried a wife, stood in his daughter's doorway, looking like a man watching his whole world start to burn a second time. It was Naomi who did not fall apart, because Naomi had done this before, and the doing of it was written into her hands. She had nursed her own baby and her own husband through the fever that killed them, and she had learned everything that Black Month had to teach. And now, God help her, all that useless, terrible knowledge finally had something it could save. She took command of that sick room with a calm that steadied Isaac and probably saved the child. She knew to keep the fever from climbing too high, and how, knew the signs to watch through the night, knew a dozen small, hard-won things that the grief had taught her, and she did not sleep for 3 days, and she did not leave that bedside, and she fought for Lily Wren with everything the loss of her own child had given her. On the 3rd night, the worst of it, when the fever peaked, and Lily grew delirious, and cried out for her mama in the dark, it was Naomi's hand she reached for, and Naomi's voice that answered her. Naomi bent close in the lamplight and held the burning little hand in both of hers, and told her, over and over, that her mama was right there, that she was not going anywhere, that Lily just had to keep breathing and stay till morning, and her mama would see her through. She had not meant to say it. The word mama had come out of her without permission, drawn up from somewhere deep, and once it was out, she found it was simply true, had been true for weeks without her admitting it. And near dawn the fever broke, and Lily's breathing eased, and the child slept and lived, and Naomi Hart put her face down on the quilt beside the sleeping girl and wept for the baby she had not been able to save, and the daughter she just had. Isaac had been in the doorway through the worst of it, hauling water, keeping the fire, watching this woman fight for his daughter's life with a skill and a fierceness that came from her own deepest wound. And somewhere in those 3 sleepless nights, watching Naomi Hart pour the whole of her lost motherhood into saving his child, Isaac Wren stopped grieving his way and started living his way, and he knew exactly what he wanted the rest of his life to look like. When the fever broke and Lily slept safe, he came and knelt beside Naomi, where she wept over the quilt, and he put his arms around her, and he held her while she cried out 2 years of grief, and he did not let go. When Naomi had cried herself quiet, Isaac told her the thing he'd come to know in that sick room, and he told it to her plain, no letters, no careful arrangements, just a man saying his heart. He told her that he had sent for a woman to mother his child, and had gotten, instead, the great second love of his life, and that he had been a slow fool not to say so sooner. He told her that he had watched her fight for Lily with everything she had, and understood that she was already this family's mother in every way that counted, and that he did not want her in the far room anymore, keeping her careful distance. He wanted her at the center of the house, at the center of his life, his wife in truth, and not just on a paper. "You came here asking for nothing," Isaac told her, brushing the tears off her tired face with his thumb. "And I have watched you give this house everything. Lily called you her mama tonight in the dark, and you answered to it, and I heard you, and it was the truest thing I've heard in 2 years. So I'm not going to ask you to be useful to me, Naomi. I'm past that. I'm asking you to let me love you, and to love me back if you can find it in you, and to let the 3 of us be a real family, the whole way, for good." Naomi Hart looked at this good man kneeling beside her in the gray dawn light, with his living daughter sleeping safe between them because of her own 2 hands, and she found that the heart she'd thought was buried in Missouri had quietly grown back whole while she wasn't looking, and that it was full, and that it was his. "I came here so afraid I had nothing left to give," she told him, holding his face the way she'd held his daughter's. "And you 2 have given me back everything I lost. Yes, Isaac, let me be her mama, and your wife, the whole way, for good. I've been asking for nothing so long I forgot a person's allowed to ask for this." She looked down at the sleeping child, and back at the man, and she said the last of it soft. "I asked for nothing, and I got a whole family. I don't know what I ever did to be so lucky twice in one life. I'll tell you how it went, because you've come the whole way and earned the ending, and it's a good one." Isaac and Naomi were married that spring in the little church at Willow Creek, and this time Naomi did not arrive in rags. Isaac had a proper dress made for her, and the whole town turned out, because word of the ragged bride who had nursed the Wren child through the winter fever had gone all around the county, and Willow Creek had decided it was rather proud to have her. Lily walked ahead of her new mother, scattering the first wildflowers of the spring, in a dress Naomi had sewn her, grinning so wide it was a wonder her face held. They had more children in the years that came, 3 more, brothers and a sister for Lily, and Naomi Hart Wren, who had once knelt in a road, certain the world meant for her to have nothing, raised the whole warm, noisy houseful, with a fullness of heart that the 2 years of empty had somehow only deepened. She never forgot the losing. She kept a small place in her heart, always, for the husband and the baby she'd buried in Missouri, and Isaac never once asked her not to, because he kept his own such place for Ellen, and the 2 of them had long since learned that a heart is not a cup that fills up, but a house that keeps adding rooms. Lily grew up knowing both her mothers, the one in heaven and the one who came in rags and stayed, and she loved them both, and that was exactly as it should be. Naomi became, over the years, a kind of mother to the whole of Willow Creek, the woman the county sent for when a child was sick and no doctor could be got in time, because the hard knowledge that had saved Lily had saved a good many children since. There was no house in that valley that had not, at one time or another, been glad of Naomi Wren's steady hands in a long, feverish night. The bride, who had arrived asking for nothing, spent the rest of her life being needed by nearly everyone, which was, in the end, the only thing she had ever asked for, given back to her 100-fold. Here is what stays with me about Naomi Hart, and about the little girl who took her hand in the street. Naomi came to Willow Creek so hollowed out by loss that she believed she had nothing left worth giving, and she was ready to apologize her way right back onto the stage and out of everyone's way. And it took a 7-year-old, who did not know you were supposed to be careful, to look past the rags and the bruises and the empty hands and see straight through to the one thing Naomi still had in abundance, which was a whole unused ocean of love and no one to give it to. Sometimes we are so sure we have nothing left that we cannot see we are carrying the very thing another soul is starving for. It takes someone reaching out and taking our hand to show us. If a small, ragged hand ever slips into yours like that, hold on. It may be the whole rest of your life, arriving in disguise, asking to be let in. If this one warmed you, stay a while by the fire. There are more of them coming, more people who arrived with empty hands and turned out to be carrying everything that mattered, and every last one is worth the time it takes to tell.